Okay, I lost my train of thought. This keeps happening now. My breathing isn't too good. A lot of Nazis were not considered worth bothering with. Hundreds, if not thousands, were allowed to go free. And rather more than that, the UK actively imported Nazis who would be useful to the government. Scientists and doctors, for example. Although my father was a civil engineer, he was a very good scientist and mathematician. Both the US and the UK made a point of importing useful Nazis. I gather they began a program called MK Ultra, which I hadn't intended to talk about. And at this moment I'm not sure I will talk about it, although I believe I was involved. I have kept on saying to the Americans that the UK also had a version of MK Ultra. And now I find I have backing on that as well, at last. That involved mind control and absolutely desperate, appalling abuse of children, which resulted in many developing what used to be called multiple personality disorder and is now called D.I.D, short for dissociative identity disorder. That was the fragmenting of personalities, so that one person has a lot of personalities. And the reason that happens is simply to protect the mind from trauma it could not otherwise bear. I do believe that happened to me. I very much believe that happened to me. I can't prove it. But I would not be the only person to say that I have more than one personality. And I do know that the abuse that I suffered in childhood was extreme. Very extreme. And in some ways my mother was involved in it. Although they sound like little things when I say them. I mean, apart from apparently not really caring whether my father killed me or not, her big thing was emotional abuse. Because my father was away in London and my brother was 7 years older and took off as soon as he possibly could, when he was 17 and I was 10, my mother and I were isolated, alone, together. We didn't see the neighbours. She didn't have friends. I had very few friends. And they weren't allowed in our house, by and large. Very, very rarely. So my mother and I were a duo, a very uncomfortable duo. I depended on her, absolutely, to protect me from my father, which was foolish, but what else is a child going to do? I think I protected her from him as much as she protected me, if not more. She would go into silences which would last for days. I was her confidant. She would offload onto me all her wartime experiences, all her childhood experiences, and I would be the listener, and I would be the repository for her memories. I don't think she ever listened to me, to be honest, as she wasn't aware that I was severely bullied in school, although I was too proud to tell her, mind you, so I'm not being fair there. She was at least aware that I was doing extremely well in school on the rare occasions I managed to get there, because I was very handicapped by severe asthma, which my father encouraged at every point. If I say encouraged, he was the cause of the majority of my asthma attacks, one way or another. So I missed a lot of school, a huge amount of school, and still managed to be in the top stream. But my father was a highly intelligent man, and he educated me quite a lot at home. I do keep going off at tangents and losing my thread. My mother, I was talking about my mother's abuse, which was very different. It's quite visible to me now that the scar on my lip is still quite pronounced. It makes my mouth look deformed on these videos. My mother didn't actually inflict it. She didn't cause the wound. But she did refuse to have it attended to medically. She refused to let my brother go for a doctor. She refused to get it stitched. And inevitably, therefore, it's scarred. She then took down all photographs of me, which is amazingly annihilating. It's amazingly... if she'd taken down all photographs of everyone, that would be one thing, but only me. There were numerous photographs of my brother everywhere. My father, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, everybody except me. And even after my first daughter was born, photographs of her went up, and none of me. And when I offered her one of me, she refused it. It sounds trivial, but it was not. It was as if she wanted me to not exist. And you see, I do keep going off at tangents at the moment. I should have stopped long ago. When I started here with Mengele. I do wonder how my mother and father found each other. She came from a family of Freemasons, which I would have thought nothing of until listening to D.I.D and various other people, and I now do think there is very much something in that. I don't know if she was effectively handed over to my father. You know, here is a woman exactly as you require. She's Aryan. She wasn't blonde and she wasn't blue-eyed. She had one blue eye. And her hair was brown. But otherwise, she came from a good family, which was a requirement. And she had the different coloured eyes so admired by Mengele. She also had finance behind her. She'd been left money in trust. Funnily enough, that all disappeared after she met my father. But what I'm mainly wondering about, is the twinning that Mengele was into. And if I'd known I could do this, I could have saved myself 1,000 pages of writing. I think I was swapped. And I think that my brother was slightly different again. I think he was my mother's, but not my father's. Simply because every time I see an Irishman, a real Irishman with black hair and blue eyes, he looks so much like my brother that I can't believe that my father was his father. And then our blood groups don't match either. They're all wrong. And I was told that when I took human biology, that my family's blood groups simply don't match up. We can't all be from the same parents. I'm stopping again.